Hello, everyone. It's great to continue with our series of webinars and kick off today's webinar. I'm happy that today we have over 200 participants interested in the topic, and thank you all for joining. So last time we discussed about the ways farm management software can help companies meet food safety standards and avoid the risk of product recalls. Today we will talk about the topic on how to buy farm management software in 6 steps, and I have a pleasure to host our today's guest, Ozren Bjelogrlic, who is International Sales Executive for Enterprise Clients. Ozzy, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Matija. Greetings to everyone watching us all around the world.
So let's first start with the housekeeping for the webinar. So during the webinar, I will do a short introduction first to set the reasoning for this webinar. And after that, Ozzy will take us through 6 key steps you should follow when buying farm management software. And the total expected duration of the webinar is up to 45 minutes. So please make sure that if you have any questions that you put them into Q&A chat, and we will try to address them during the webinar. And if we will not have the time, we will definitely address them after the webinar. So before we dive into the topic, for those who are new to the world of digital agriculture, let's set the base and define what farm management software is when it comes to enterprise and corporate farms. So farm management software is focused on the management of the complete life cycle of the crop production, from both agronomic and financial perspective. So farm management software delivers support for farm resource management, season planning, real-time monitoring of crops and fields, daily work organization of field activities, securing full production traceability and compliance with food safety standards, and ability to analyze farm productivity and profitability by field, crop, and variety. For enterprise companies, farm management software is an extension to their ERP system, and it seamlessly integrates with both ERP system and other systems in place. At AGRIVI, we are in the mission to bring farm management software to agriculture and food industry with goal to produce healthy, safe, and nutritious food produced in a sustainable and profitable way. We have created this guide based on our experiences of working with hundreds of enterprise companies globally, and with goal to help anybody who is interested in buying farm management software to find the best software, the best vendor that will meet their business needs the best. So this webinar is also the official launch of our ebook on the same topic of how to buy FMS, which will explain in very details every step of the process you should take. So all the participants of this webinar will, after the webinar as well, receive the ebook, so you will have much detailed guideline as well. At this point, let's kick off with the topic. Ozren will take over the lead in the webinar and will guide us through the 6 steps of best practices. Ozzy, the floor is yours.
All right, Matija, thank you very much for the introduction. Again, greetings to everyone watching us all around the world. As Matija mentioned, as you saw through our digital channels, today's topic is how to buy a farm management software in 6 steps. Now, before we dig deeper into all of those steps, and you are at the point where you're inquiring, you understand that you might need a software, who to approach, how to approach. There is a reality check with anything you want to purchase in your life, right? So that's the same thing for the system or software. And many questions are arising when choosing FMS or farm management system, as we call it. What type of farm management is the best for your business needs? Which farm management software is available in your country, in your region? How do you define requirements and criteria to manage the purchasing process? And how do you choose the best vendor that will guide you towards the success? And the success could mean the successful implementation as well as the successful adoption amongst your company, amongst different different teams. So the overview of those 6 steps will be going from 1 to 6, as you see on the screen, with the starting of definition of project team. As you define your project team, you are moving into the identifying business needs and specific requirements for your organization or specific departments. Afterwards, you are diving into analyzing FMS types of vendors and relevant ones for your specific requirements. Afterwards, you're defining the budget and the timeline needed to purchase as well as implement that software. And shortly after that, you can continue on to the gap fit analysis and deep dive with your selection of top vendors. After you complete the 5th step, the 6th one and the final one should be the process of buying the software. We will explain in details all of these ones. Something that I want to mention on this slide is that usually with our enterprise clients, what I have personal experience is that these first 4 should be covered internally, whereas the 5th and 6th step is something that you will it will influence heavily with your cooperation with vendors, meaning outsiders of your company. So as the step number 1, we said that you should define a project team. You can see the 4 categories of team members, right? So project sponsor, project managers or PMs as we call it, business owner, and key users. Now, the project sponsor, based on our experience, is usually somebody from the C-level or a senior, at least a senior level within your company, right? And they are the one who are, it can also be a group to that effect, but those are, that type of person or a group is the one sponsoring, managing approving the budget, and in the end approving the specific needs as well as the purchase of that specific software. These type of people or groups are heavily communicated with project management from project managers during the steering committees that happen. It could happen once a month, once a quarter, depending on the length of the project. Now, the project managers are usually people who are managing the organization of all aspects of collaboration amongst different teams, gathering the information, gathering the goals, leading the planning and execution, as well as communicating internally and externally. The third one, and to some extent, it might be considered a crucial category of teammate, is the business owner. Now, the business owner usually comes from the active team as a team lead role, who will be using heavily the specific software, right? And they are the ones that needs to approve specific needs, requirements that are gathered within their team and moving forward. So that business owner has to have commitment during the purchasing process of a specific software. And key users, as the word explained itself, are usually the users of the systems, and they can be across different departments.
Yeah. So maybe Ozzy, just to dive deeper into those key roles. So there is often confusion between the project sponsor and business owner, and people often don't differentiate what are the roles, because it sounds that often those are roles that are same role, and sometimes that is actually the case.
That is, yeah, true.
But often, and it is recommended that these are separate roles, because the project sponsor, based on all the experience we gather, is always the person from the C-level. It might be farm owner. It is somebody who, from the strategic side, sponsors the implementation to secure that everybody takes the project as serious as possible.
I agree. Yeah, it could be in some organizations the same person. However, to many successful implementation with our clients, usually they are separated people. Where, as I mentioned, business owner is somebody who is managing the business unit and leads the specific team that will be using the software heavily.
So this is usually like agriculture department manager,
Correct.
production manager, farm manager.
Correct.
So somebody who operationally owns software.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And maybe the second question that where I would like to dive deeper are, so besides the people that will be directly using the software and that are key users, so who are other beneficiaries, and should they be as well included, like marketing, sustainability department that we see more often at our clients?
This is a topic that is quite often overlooked. We need to include all of the team members when defining a team, as well as you will see when we move forward with gathering requirements. As you mentioned, some of these marketing team, controlling team, finance team, they will all have impacts, more or less, right, for a specific system. But it's important that they are included into the from the get-go, right?
And eventually what we see that more and more companies are currently having strong ESG standards in place as well, and they need to get the data from farm management system to be able to calculate their footprints.
Exactly. Yeah. So the software itself might be used with, for example, with some organizations in one department. However, the software itself might have an impact on several departments that could potentially have a benefit and value from that software.
So definitely the recommendation would be take the requirements from other departments that might have the need and use of the data that you will be collecting through the farm management software as well.
And that's actually a great intro to our next. So this will be the first step in having the successful purchase of FMS. And the second one will be identifying business needs and requirements. Now, we already touched on the requirements from different departments, and it's important to include everyone in your organization to create a list of requirements. Now, we will talk about it on the next slide, and certainly in our ebook, you will have extensive template that you can use as a guideline. But a couple more topics that I would like to talk about, and that's the second one, as the requirements prioritization. We believe that not everything is must-have, right? And you have to be very realistic when choosing a software. The good standard, at least for our customers, would be to have three tiers of prioritization. So something that is a must-have, that is a critical for a go live or a successful implementation, something that is we should have, but is not a critical aspect of go live. However, when we talk with the vendors, this could be something that is on their roadmap that will be developed within the next quarter or two, or within a year, for example. And the third prioritization is something, some of the features and values that are nice to have. Something that is definitely not a go live critical, and something that you can live without it, but potentially can make a gap between successful vendors and somebody that might be less successful, right? And so you should be aware of those prioritizations, and they should also be managed later on during the implementation. The bullet that you see here, looking back at the requirements during the implementation, is essential, as you don't wanna select a vendor or a company to implement certain solution and then change all of your prioritizations halfway through the project. It can create a chaos, and for people who are active on a project, it can create a lot of dissatisfaction on both ends, right? So it's important, when you define requirements, you confirm it amongst different teams, you stand by that. Business owner is approving them or has commitment. requirements prioritization is understood, communicated, then you are not changing them as you move forward. You have to be realistic as you what you should have, what is must have, and again, what is something that is nice to have. It can clear a lot of confusion for vendors.
Yes, maybe just a comment additionally on that. So we are speaking about farm management software as products. So products that are already ready-made with available feature sets. So of course there are some sometimes requirements for some specific customizations, add-ons, which can be a burden for products as well. So when thinking of those, it is really important to highlight what is a must-have, what is a could have, what is should have. And in the end, this will help in phasing out the project during the implementation, that you can kick off the product with the processes that are of top priority, and then do the implementation later on as well in a phased approach.
Yeah, we like to say that there is no perfect system. We just all have to be aware. What do we go with, and how do we prioritize our requirements and specific needs? All right, so when we covered the second step and we identify business needs and requirements, this is the extension of the requirements for the template that you can categorize. So for example, here you can see the farm and resource management category or crop production management. It can be analytical category. What do you want to achieve? So these are some of the topics that you should internally investigate and see how important they are to your specific departments, specific personnel, right? And what is their specific description, so the vendors can understand as much as possible just from reading, because it can save a lot of your time with the questions later on. Again, as I said, the full requirements template is available within our How to Buy FMS in 6 Steps ebook. Okay, now the third step should be your analyzing the farm management software types and relevant vendors. When we talk about FMSs in our industry, there are usually 4 types of FMSs, and we'll touch on them just in a couple seconds. The second thing that we will cover within this group category is how to start the research and what to be careful of or aware of. And to finish up with the section 3 or step 3 should be the identifying the top 3 vendors. When we talk about 4 groups or 4 types of FMSs, we group them, they're usually grouped in these 4 categories. So the first category are basic platforms. And usually the basic platforms on today's market are simple precision agriculture and record keeping platforms that might have, for example, capabilities for satellite imagery, for weather insights that can help you out with the precision agriculture aspect. Moving on to the second group will be the comprehensive farm management platforms, who are covering all of the capabilities of basic platforms, but are extended with complete farm management. And more specifically, they're covering as well also the workforce management, the season planning capabilities, the inventory management, financial management, analytical part that can help you out all the way to distinguishing, all the way down to your profitability and all of those aspects of analytics. Now, moving on to the third category would be the agronomic advisory platforms. And those are FMS platforms that can be either simple or comprehensive, but extended with modules for agronomic advisors. They are somehow what we've noticed on the market, country or region based, and they can help users of these type of platforms with specific farmers portfolio, managing any type of advices, analyzing their risk health, and helping them with with any type of advices. As you might guess, usually these type of platforms are used by input producers like seed companies, like chemical companies, fertilizer companies, and so, or for that matter, anybody who's advising farmers or their organizations. And the fourth group of or fourth type of FMSs are agricultural supply chain platforms, and those are FMS tailored for food and beverage companies to manage their complete agricultural supply chain. They have extended, they are usually covering global operations, and within those operations, these type of platforms can support organizations with the setting certain standards that we talked about, for example, for the ESG aspect. They can set for certain certification procedures, purchasing processes to their farmers network, and so on. So they and as well helping farmers improve their profitability in the end when they adopt the system, if they choose to do so. So these will be the four types of FMSs. And as we are, and as you are, as somebody looking for the system, aware of this, you can move forward with your search. Now, the natural next step should be to use Google, for example, or any search engine to search for FMS market reports. And we all know that there is plenty available today's market in the last several years. We can also Google for FMSs as the key vendors are positioned within the first 3 or 4 pages, depending on your country. And here is listed as the last, but I think it's very important, is asking for a recommendation or referral from your acquaintances, somebody from your network about specific vendors that they might be working with. And if they have a good opinion or good experience, we heavily suggest for at least for you to reach out to those types of companies. Now, there's several things that you should be careful of, and that's listed on the right side here on the screen. So lists of top farm management software on some vendor blogs, promo articles in media, and directories with rankings, they all have one thing in common. And that thing is that they are usually sponsored by somebody who needs that needs them to be on a top list or something like that. So you should be aware of that. Is this a paid article? Is this a paid promo directory with rankings so anybody can put what they want? So those can be heavily influenced by one party. So we suggest searching for independent market reports.
Maybe just to add, really searching for those keywords, farm management software market reports, or farm management software top vendor will give you direct independent reports where you can have a list of top 10, 15, 20 vendors by geography, by farm management software type. So it will help you in narrowing down key vendors for your region, and you will be able to move on basically to the next steps with that.
Correct. Yeah, correct. As we move forward, by now, as you gather your requirements, your project team first, your requirements and needs, then you go into the search. By now, you should have at least a list of 10 to 20 vendors. The next step that we suggest is narrowing down that search to top 5 vendors that might fit your requirement. And for how to do that for this phase is the segments that you need to be aware of during this high level assessment. The key aspects of, or the key segments are the product. Does the product meet your requirements and needs? Do you believe, does your team believes that it will create a value and specific benefits moving forward? Case studies and references, you can always search on specific vendors. Are they open about their references? Are there any available case studies with similar organizations to yours? Implementation process is something that is crucial. You should check into if vendor is offering on-site implementation? Is it with you every step along the way until there is a go live? As by our experiences, this creates a successful adoption amongst the team rather than just leaving you on your own to figure it out. The third one will be the vendor ownership. And this is, as in IT, we have many investments and a lot of things are changing rapidly, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. Vendor ownership can be crucial. Now, two things that you should be aware of in this regard. One of those are vendors that are independently owned. Another ones are vendors that might be owned by the bigger organizations, such as seed producers, big chemical companies, or food organizations. Both of these options or both of the vendors are valid and they can be reliable, certainly, but this is something for you to be aware of. And the fifth thing or segment, while you're doing this high-level overview, is the pricing. Our advice is not to focus specifically on the price itself, as the enterprise vendors or vendors for enterprise segment will not have it listed out publicly. Usually this is the case with simple basic platforms. But here you should focus on how are they charging. Is it software as a service, meaning is it a subscription model, or is it a one-time investment and stuff like that?
Maybe just to highlight here, Ozzy, additionally, the two things. So on the product side, based on the public information, and once you know the 4 different key types of farm management softwares and product, your requirements gathered by the team, you will be able to very fast filter out those that are not the type of the product you need. And then after the type, you will be able to figure out the requirements. And on the vendor ownership, I think that here, the key differentiator for you, who is a fit for you, will be if you have a lot of IP inside your organization within your data, whether this is R&D specific, customer specific, but if there is a lot of intellectual property in your data, then you should definitely pursue for the independent software vendor. If you are okay with sharing your data for different purposes with others, so they can support you more, but have the insight into the data, then you are okay as well with vendors that are owned by somebody from the value chain as well.
Exactly, yeah. All right, so now we have covered those 3 steps. The 4th step should be for you to define the budget and the timeline. Now, this can be very tricky as something that is very new. The IT systems are changing rapidly. We should budget all elements for the successful implementation, and we'll talk about those just in a second on the next slide. A couple things that I wanted to talk before that is that timeline matters, and first of all, how to determine the timeline. Now, this is up to you, depending on what do you grow, how do you operate, how do you organize your business, and what type of crops, for example, are you working with, the season. Certainly, the best option will be to start a project during the off season, and while your people are more accessible, have more time, rather than going into the season. There could be projects that are going into the season, but usually these are used as a proof of concepts or something to show that the systems are working. Now, how to determine the timeline is you need to be aware of many different things. How long, how extensive is your requirement list? What are your specific needs? You also have to communicate with the vendor about your goals, and they also have to communicate their positions about how long is it going to take, for example, to implement the software. So this all plays a crucial role when defining the timeline. But let's go back to budget and elements. And now you can see that we group them in 2 categories, and those will be recurring as well as the second one, and one-time fees, right? So going from left to right, you should budget for the software licenses or subscription. And those are on an annual recurring base. Now, the infrastructure is the IT infrastructure that is needed to deploy and make sure that your instance of the system is working properly, and this is recurring fee. Now, at the beginning of the project, the implementation services are most commonly used, right? And they include the data migration, setting up that infrastructure, doing the farm analysis, making sure that the vendors understand your operation in more depth, as well as moving then onto the training that is extension of the implementation services. As you can see, that's also one-time fee. Once when we import the data, when we prepare the system, then we go into education and training of the key users or the super users within specific organizations. Now, the customer success and support is essential throughout the year. Usually, this is recurring price that might come within the subscription, but if needed, it can be also made as a separate entity within a budget that you might have agronomists or digital experts of the agronomy working with you, making sure that the systems and technologies adopted properly, that you're getting the full value out of the system. And then the sixth one would be maintenance. And this is pertaining to the custom modules that you might decide to develop with the vendor. If you decide to go that route, you might also expect a maintenance fee for that specific custom developed module.
Maybe just to add on, Ozzy, on this is we often meet when defining the budget a question of what comes first. So that chicken or egg question. So whether you first define the budget or you get actually estimates, proposals from vendors, and then you determine the budget. But there is no true answer to that.
There's not really a true answer. I believe that every organization has its flow. Every vendor has its flow. Sometimes we might be approached with a client who has very valid requirements and a budget. Sometimes they're very open to hear what is on the market, start the research, and then depending on the proposal, commercial proposal, and the ROIs and everything that goes alongside with that, then they decide on the final budget aspect. But these 6 parts is something that you should certainly be aware of, at least be aware of when vendors are creating their price and approaching to you, or when you are trying to anticipate the cost and calculate TCOs and potential return on investments, so you know what you're working with.
And maybe just additional question regarding budget. So there is often a question from which pocket basically the budget comes. So usually what we meet is it is basically from the production unit. Mm-hmm. So who owns operationally the software? So the business owner, in the end, that goes to the budget of that unit. But what we would recommend, what we see more and more in common with enterprise clients, is that other units tend to participate when it comes to buying a farm management software. Like if controlling department needs specific sets of data to do something, they can participate. If sustainability department wants to meet ESG goals completely, they tend to participate with their budget as well. So when defining the budget, if you have constraint within your unit, try to see who else can sponsor as well the project and the budget.
Correct. This is something that is quite often tricky to figure out who's gonna take out of their budget, right? But every company is different. By the way, we mentioned in the beginning, but feel free to ask us any questions. We'll certainly try to answer. If not today, certainly try to follow up. But yeah, feel free to ask in the question box. All right, moving on to the next one. And this is the 5th step, that is a gap fit analysis and deep dive with top vendors. Now, this fifth step or gap fit analysis might be considered to many expert or many organizations a crucial step. This is a step where you're gonna start talking with vendors. You're gonna see the dynamics that you might have with them. You know, how do you like their personality, what they represent? As well as covering obviously your requirements that you work heavily on and then specific needs, and how do they answer with their product lines or with their capabilities. Now, the second thing would be to start a deep dive with the top 2 vendors, and we'll talk about it in a second, and also the deep dive flow. The advice for starting the deep dive with top 2 vendors would be that if you, from the previous slide, you selected the top 5, right? If you start going into deep dive with 5 different vendors, you can certainly do that, but you have to be aware of time and investment that your whole organization, if you have different team members from different departments, are participating in meetings in the deep dive flow. So that's why we suggest the deep dive with top 2 vendors and keep the other 3 out of your top 5 as a fallback solution. Now, let's talk a little bit about the deep dive flow, right? You should be, as you are gathering the requirements, the needs, you can certainly expect many questions from vendors. So you should prepare the questions and answers for the vendors, questions for them specifically, besides your requirements list of your operational of your operations. But the general question could be how long they've been on the market, what is their ownership structure, what is their footprint in different markets, how do they do the implementation, do they have on-site, all of these general questions, the number of employees, and maybe some financial aspects of their business. Whereas on the other side, you might expect the questions from vendors about your operations, like what type of crops you're growing, the land size of or arable land per crop, for example, how many employees do you have, what is your IT landscape, what are the specific systems that needs to be integrated, and so on and so on. But this is something that you can do as a homework before scheduling introduction call. These questions that I just mentioned and many more are listed in our ebook, so I encourage you to definitely download that and adjust it to your need. Now, let's start with so that will be I'll call it a preset, right, of our deep dive flow. Now, the first call is introductory call, and out of all of these, you should be also aware of the time limits that you want to invest with your team. This is usually done within 30 to 60 minutes, where the top 2 vendors that you decide to invite for this process is first you want to brief the vendor about your operations, give them the high-level overview. Why are you looking for new software, and what type of requirements are listed by their team, as well as meeting them if this is an option, meeting them in person, so you can get this personal connection with them as well. After the vendor sees your requirements, you get to know them. They can then review those requirements, and you can schedule the next meeting. Now, the next meeting is the first deep dive that we say. Now, this is the one where you discuss with the vendor about requirements checks, right, and requirement priorities. This is something that they're going to be heavily asking you about. If this is something, for example, in some cases, vendors might have workarounds about your specific operations, but not immediate solution for that, or something is going to be accessible within the next couple of quarters, or they might need additional clarification about your operations. You should definitely spend this first deep dive, probably within a good 1 to 2 hours, where you dig deep into your operations and make sure you answer all of those vendor questions.
Maybe just to add here the difference and why it's recommended actually to go through vendor response and presentations in the first deep dive, not on the intro call that much, is because you would like the vendor to focus on your actual requirements. And that's why in the introductory call, it is very important to focus on your requirements, what do you need, and not on the vendor. So that vendor has a great opportunity to prepare well to address your requirements in a proper manner. Otherwise, you will get just a generic presentation that might lead you to something that you don't need, or you could get a feeling that, okay, this vendor is not the right fit for me, and the vendor at that point doesn't know actually your business requirements. So that's why the focus on the intro call should definitely be on you, and then on the first deep dive is on how vendor meets your requirements.
Yeah, correct. And like we said here, vendor is going to have plenty of questions. I'm sure they will ask you. You might not be able to answer immediately. That's all right. The next step will be the second deep dive, and based on the vendor questions that you might not answer immediately at the meeting, you should certainly answer before the next meeting. And that next meeting is a second deep dive, when the vendor is making a tailor-made presentation to start with, and after that doing the tailor-made demo. Please, what we suggest is that keep the focus on a concept, not on a specific data when you are seeing a certain demo, right? Vendors have many different demo environments to showcase their products, but the focus on a concept and how the specific vendor is covering your steps or your operations, and how do they envision that the software can bring value to your team and your overall organization. After that, you will have a little bit better understanding of what they can do. I'm sure they have a good understanding. The third deep dive, and so there's a homework on both sides, but on the vendor side, vendors should go back to the drawing table and create a proposal for you. The functional specification or technical specification about their product and how it's covering your requirements and brings the value to your, in the end, to your organization, as well as the commercial proposal. You should clear all of the open questions straight away. Once when you do that, the vendor can go, or you together with the vendor, you can go with the proposal presentation. Now, they will present a proposal. You should ask as many open questions during that meeting. How do they structure the price? How is the specific, if you have any questions about operational efficiency of the software or covering their process, make sure you ask. You can certainly ask after that, as any vendor will give you time, or you will ask for a time to review the proposal, which is normal. So you will have a homework to do. You can do amongst different teams, but again, business owner is the one that is going to be with their team of experts reviewing. Project manager is coordinating everything, all of the communication, the aspects of the process, and then as you move forward, you will include the project sponsor. Now, the last step will be the gap fit conclusion, and the gap fit conclusion usually comes after your comments on a proposal. You might ask for additional discounts. You might ask to tweak certain commercial parameters, decrease the land size that you might cover in your operations, or increase number of the users, whatever the vendor has a preference to create a price for, or integrations with different system, implementation amongst different countries and rollout, especially if it's in phases. So you should give comments to your vendors, and they will create a final proposal that at the gap fit conclusion, you will review that proposal. And you can, in the end, present your conclusion to the vendor based on a specific list of requirements.
Maybe just to address two questions that we received as well. So first one is also, do you basically define the timeline as well of the implementation with the vendor in this stage, and how to define the timeline that will meet your business requirements to hit the season, before the season? So when is this done? When is the best timing to discuss that with the vendor?
So usually from the introduction call to the first deep dive, the vendor is going to ask you about your operations. When does your season start, depending on different various crops? So they will get a good understanding of how does or they will have experience about the specific season lengths of crops, right? But in the same time, they also have responsibilities to you if you agree with them on contracts to implement the software. So they have their own process. So this is something that you should usually talk about in introductory call, first deep dive, and then in a proposal, we certainly like to include the phases of the rollouts of the software, either full or in phases, as I mentioned. But this is something that usually within the first introductory call, first deep dive, discussed and analyzed.
And the second one is basically a part of the comment or question is, when is the best timing to do the internal reviews? Because after you meet the vendor, then basically, should you immediately do the internal review after the meeting? Should you do that later on? Is that a separate step here as well?
Yeah, so we actually mentioned that on the third deep dive. However, you are constantly communicating here. This is the communication channels should be open. Your project manager is the person dedicated to keep the line of communication, first of all with vendor, but as well as with the internal teams, right? So you should go back and forth about your requirements, prioritization, making sure that it's understood by your team first and then by your vendor. If anything is clear, to communicate it. But once when you will get a good sense when you do the research, you select top 5 and then you go into top 2, you will get a good understanding what they can do, what they cannot do. But as you receive the proposal after the second deep dive, and then you're going to review that proposal, you're going to meet internally, do internal reviews of the values they can bring. Maybe before getting the final proposal, you will meet again. So I would say there's the cooperation has to be all across the board in every step along the way, but it's going to hit heavily towards the end of selection of.
And definitely one of the recommendations we saw throughout the process, it's good to divide basically that you don't go first with one vendor to deep dive, then the other vendor, and then you do the reviews, because you will have a mixed functions because there is a lot of requirements you will probably have, and you might mix it up. So it's better to, when you have the deep dive with one vendor, then do the internal review. How do you feel about it? Then you do the deep dive with the other vendor, and then you do the internal review for that vendor, not to mix it up.
Correct.
In between as well.
Correct. I agree. So this is again, these are the high overviews, right, or some recommended steps. But each organization has its own processes and policies that they might want to follow through, and that's certainly fine as long as they are described to the vendor, as well as I think it's fair for the vendor to describe their process to you as well. So this is a mutual relationship and respect. As we completed the 5 steps, we come to the final step, and that is buying the software. Here we have also heavily impacted by the cooperation with the vendor. As we said, 5th and 6th steps are heavily influenced with the cooperation with the vendors. But here you have decided to select a certain vendor, and you accepted their commercial terms, but you want to clear some things up, right? The first topic should be if you decide to go with the 1-year contract, for example, or multi-year contract. The reason for that is that you might get the significant discounts for the multi-year contract, and it also touches on the second point where you control the inflation and price change, as certain vendors might increase their annual fee, right? So you might be paying a lot more with the inflation, but if you decide to purchase the multi-year contract, there you are focusing on the capital expenses or investments.
Yeah, maybe just to add on this topic, so we see a lot of enterprise corporations that are pursuing multi-year contracts, because if you have a multi-year contract, you can put it to your capital expenses, to capex. If you are going with 1-year contract, then it's definitely operating expense, so it will be your OPEX as well.
And it all depends also on your cash position, right? Certain seasons can be really, really good, while certain seasons, unfortunately, might not be as good. So this is something that you should keep in mind. So this is part where you can control that inflation and price change. The third step is the intellectual property or IP ownership and data access. As there are many vendors who are operating with the cloud solutions, there is always a questions of who owns the data, where is my data stored, and questions of this nature. This is something that you should clear. You should be the owner, or we at least advise it. You should always be a owner of your data, and this is be contractually agreed upon. And then also on the other end, who has the data access from the vendor side as well as internally from your side. Something that we see on the market that should be considered are the standards and compliance. The vendors are putting a lot of effort in making sure that they put their business on the top with certain ISO certifications, certain compliances across different markets. So you can find definitely different standards of quality that should be put as a prerequisite or requirement within the contract. Another thing that is not obligatory, but is definitely good and positive to see on the market are the vendors that are offering insurance against any type of liabilities like cybersecurity liability, damages, or insolvency liabilities of those specific vendors. So when you cover these 5 topics and when you are ready, definitely the project sponsor, again, going back to this person or group, are the ones that are approving and that are then ready to purchase or buy software.
And we received also one good question here as well, is at which point we should discuss the customer support, customer success service as well. And this should be definitely a part of the proposal that you have, because based on experiences we have, to secure the adoption, you don't need just customer support that is reactive, that reacts on your needs once you have questions. You should pursue the customer success service, where the vendor has a team that supports you to proactively adopt. So they do the trainer approaches, they create your internal champions inside. Right. So, and this should be discussed during your requirements as well. But in the end, also contracting that should be a part of this 6th step as well.
Yeah, certainly it should be outlined during the requirements, needs, then in the first proposal or initial proposal. Then once when you review it, you go back and you discuss the proposal again with your vendor. You should definitely have it outlined within the proposal and put it as a part of the contract.
Yeah. We did receive quite a few additional questions, but we are a bit behind schedule. So we will address them after the webinar with each one of you as well. So for now, Ozzy, can we do the recap?
Yeah. So we spent last few hours, half an hour or so, talking about what are the 6 steps to successfully choosing farm management software. To recap again, the number 1 will be defining a project team, identifying your specific business needs and requirements across different departments, analyzing farm management software types and relevant vendors. After that, defining the budget and the timeline for the choosing as well as for the implementation. Deep dive with the top vendors and make sure that you communicate the gap fit analysis and properly select the vendor, and in the end cover contractual terms and make sure that you are ready to buy the software. So these 6 steps are essential in a process of selecting the farm management software.
Thank you, Ozzy, for sharing this guideline with us today. As you mentioned, so all of participants will receive an ebook that will quite in detail describe all these 6 steps with all the templates for your requirements, for questions that you should address to vendor, that you could expect from vendors, so on. So you will have that available in the ebook as well.
Certainly.
So for those who are not yet familiar with AGRIVI, so at AGRIVI we are a specialized agtech company. We are one of global leaders in farm management software. We work with some of the largest global corporations today, with a lot of small and medium-sized farms across the globe. So over a couple of thousand customers use us in over 100 countries today. And we are proud to also collaborate with different organizations that are addressing agriculture and food industry, like EIT Food by European Union, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the Food Safety Market Consortium, and many others. So thank you all for all the questions. If you have any additional questions there, please feel free to reach out to us. You can connect us through email. You can connect with us through LinkedIn. We will be happy to address your questions and to get in touch. If you are looking for farm management software, we will be happy to consider if we can support your needs as well. So feel free to reach out. Also, if you have any suggestions for our additional webinars, send us topics that you're interested in. We'll try to cover them as well. See you on the next webinar. Till then, I wish you all a great and successful Q4 to close all of your business goals. And Ozzy, thank you very much for being our guest on the webinar today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.